Hello, everybody, and welcome to Digital Works TV. I'm Steve Johnson. My guest today is Major General retired Jim Myles. And, sir, thank you for being. Jim's right, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to make sure I address you as. By the way, and we chat about this. Does everybody call you General when they talk to you?
They initially do, but I always want them to know, just call me Jim. It was a great honor being in the service, but don't call me General. And my wife calls me Jim and other names, and so I want everybody else to do the same thing.
I'm well aware of that phenomenon, except my wife has never called me General.
First, it's good to be with you, Steve.
Well, hey.
You're a great guy in this community, and it's always a pleasure being with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We're talking about your background. I looked you up, of course, and one of the things I saw is you have a business degree from Middle Tennessee State, so you're practically one of us.
Yes, I do. I am. We feel that way. Yeah, okay. We do. Yes, graduated in 1974 with my wife. We met at a high school dance on a Friday night in Nashville. She went to an all-girls Catholic school. I went to all-boys Catholic school, and on a Friday night after football game, I met her. And 5 guys, 5 girls over there. I said, I'll take the redhead. That was 56 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we go to Middle Tennessee State and graduated there in 1974, and about in 72 they had this thing called the draft lottery. And they basically take all the birthdays and put it in a ping pong ball machine, and usually if you're on the first 100 that's called out, you're going to go into the Army. And so my number was 32, so I was voluntarily told, you're probably going in the Army.
So did you join ROTC when you were in
Did. Joined ROTC, and best decision that was made for me in my life.
Okay, so you went into the Army as a junior officer,
yes,
correct?
Second lieutenant.
Okay, but still, that's you came up through the ranks and had, from what I'm just looking at your biography, you have had a lot of different jobs.
I haven't held very many of them very long, but when I came in as an infantry officer initially. Of course, infantry officers, the guys that are actually on the front lines and fight. And I would tell you, every other branch in the service, their whole job is to support that infantry soldier. Yeah. And everything I did from those 36 years in the Army was all about trying to make sure we support that guy on the front line, because what I learned those 2 years that I was in the infantry shaped everything.
Yeah. Hey, let's take a quick time out for some great news. Open enrollment is here. Digital Works Pro is offering a series of courses on model-based systems engineering. First up, an introduction to MBSE. This short course is designed for executives, managers, and senior leaders who want to know more about model-based systems engineering. The course explains what MBSE is, why it matters, and how it can improve the scope of projects, from cost to schedule to quality. You will be more than ready to support your organization when it inevitably adopts MBSE. Again, enrollment is open right now. To make sure you have a seat, scan the QR code on your screen or go to the link at our website, digitalworks.org. To make sure there's a spot for you, register and do it now. Now, you talked about, you were, was your last command at AMCOM at Army
yes.
Aviation Missile Command at
yes.
Redstone, but before that, you were doing testing. Is that what you said?
Yes, I was the Command General for Army and Test and Evaluation Command. That's where anything that is going to be fielded, we have to make sure it works for the soldiers. So I was the head guy. It was both get out those systems that were large programs, and it was also, because this was after 9/11. It was all about getting the equipment to the warfighter as soon as possible. And that means you shortcut some things, you understand risk, and you mitigate that risk, and you get that equipment out to the soldier that needs it.
Okay, so that meant that you being a business guy and an infantry commander, that you weren't a scientist, an engineer, or technician, but you worked with them and had to understand what they were doing.
Yes, I did.
I did. Was that a revelation?
Yes, it was. It was like at Dugway Proving Ground. We had a all chemical and biological equipment that's tested is there. We had 26 guys with the engineering degrees from some sort of chemical and biological background, and they talked a different language They really did, but you needed to understand it. And where I would go is I'd come back from an infantry perspective.
Yeah.
I got all that, what you're telling me. I think I understand it, and I do. But what does that mean for the warfighter? What's it going to do? And tell me how you're going to get it to them at the time of need, not at the time that you want. Because one of the things I found over time is that if somebody in a particular technical area wanted to make sure he got it right to 100%, usually that means it takes too much time. Usually that means that his equities will all be met, but maybe the warfighters won't be met. Contracting in particular is one that used to frustrate me. I don't want a 100% solution on contracting. You get 80%, legal gets 80, engineer, I'll give them 90%, but the warfighter gets 100%.
So you got used to, I would imagine, the need for speed, to quote a movie.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But as a commander, you had to balance that with making sure whatever it was worked. So I imagine you've had a lot of conversations detailing what you just mentioned, where you said, no, tell me, will this work? And
yes.
and we really do need it now. Was there a lot of those conversations?
Absolutely. We in fact, even when I was at ATEC, we were deeply involved in the counter IED fight. This was about understanding what went off. Any idea?
Can you tell me what ATEC?
Yeah, Army Test and Evaluation Command.
Okay,
yeah.
That's okay.
And IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, when they put the bombs underneath the road, and they would initially run a wire out there. And so we would fly helicopters over, figure out where the wires are, and we'd know where the bombs were set. Then they went digital, and they got rid of the wires, and so they went to radio technology to let the device off. We figured that out, and we came up with jammers. Then they changed the frequencies, and we were back here trying to anticipate it, and we always tried to stay 2 steps ahead. And so we knew they were going to go to they were going to go to a radio frequency instead of using wire. So we anticipated that. Then we knew they were going to go up the frequency. So this was changing the frequencies. We knew they were going to go to the telephone or for the iPhones. And so you had to anticipate it. So anytime an IED would go off, we would make sure that we would replicate that IED at Yuma Proving Ground. We set up a little track, we call it Little Baghdad, and we would try to recreate that and and then go through the mitigation piece. 48 hours was the standard. I want to know what happened and then what we're doing to mitigate it.
Wow. So within 48 hours after you realized that this is what they're doing now, you
replicate it.
And I would assume there was an engineer there who was okay. Here, what can we do? Looking for solutions.
Yeah, there was. In fact, I had a great story. I had 2 twin brothers, both of them engineers. One of them went to a place called Rustamaya, which is just east of Baghdad. They called it IED Alley, and he went with the soldiers to see what was happening initially. He would be calling back to his brother. Then we would get that information back out to Baghdad, and we turned it around quickly. There was something called an EFP, explosive form penetrator, which is a nasty, nasty IED device. We were able to stop an IED, that device, we were able to stop it from penetrating a Humvee in a very short period of time just because of an engineer being in there and shorten the timeline. And this comment you made about engineers, I used to use this term, lack of a decision is a decision. And if you don't make a decision, something is going to happen that's going to slow the process down. And so I want you to make decisions. If you haven't failed and come back to me and told me, you know what, I made a mistake, sir, you aren't going fast enough. Unless you're that 1% that never makes a mistake. And I haven't met too many of those. The idea is you've got to make a decision to move the process along, especially with big bureaucracy like the Army.
Okay, so and of course that was in a wartime footing.
Right.
In I want to say more normal times.
Yeah.
Does it slow down a little bit, or is there always? And I guess when an active conflict isn't going on, there probably is a lot of anticipation of what might we face.
Yeah, there is. And the way it comes across is when you're in the fight, you're trying to come up with the most effective solution possible. When you're not in the fight and you're concerned about money and other things, you want to come up with the most efficient things.
Yeah.
Effectiveness and efficiency, there's two different standards altogether. And sometimes you get, well, you get held accountable for both, but you got to know which one's more important than the other one.
Yeah.
What's interesting now that's going on in the world today is because we have near peer competitors, and there's so much happening in Ukraine and what's going on with Israel, always something that goes on in the Middle East, and we have China over in the Pacific. We're always into now what it seems to be the most effective thing possible, which means the efficiency is not as great, but there's this tension that always gets there when it comes to funding. And so this is what you see a lot of the military trying to work their way through. And on top of that, with some of the restructuring that's going on, there's a lot of people in great positions that know what right looks like, but trying to work their way through the process while you're and becoming more efficient while you're actually trying to make sure you're giving the soldiers the best thing possible is a real challenge.
Yeah, and when I hear the word efficient talking about equipment, I always think the more efficient, the more expensive it is. So and even with a monster defense budget, huge defense budget, there is still not enough money to do everything at your leisure, do it like you want.
That's correct.
So that is something
this is where you get into understanding risk and prioritizing risk. You never get out of that. I don't care how much money you have. There's still an understanding of what's the risk, what's the threat, how much can I let that threat or focus on that threat without focusing on this other threat. Where do I balance it? Where is the risk? And how do I make sure I'm mitigating that risk? A lot of time is being spent on that because you can't do everything.
Yeah.
So it is about understanding that. So you get to the point of engineers, to what you're saying, some of the great multipliers of being able to be more effective is the human endeavor of engineering.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you have people that can create things that make a soldier to be able to operate in a safer environment, keep them alive more. Just the fact of what our medical engineers did to keep soldiers alive, it's incredible. I visited Iraq, pick the year 2000, I think it was around 2006. Went to Iraq, saw some soldiers that told me a story about some people that were hurt, and I went to visit the soldier in the hospital. Came back to Fort Hood, went to a hospital because I always made a routine of going to visit those that came back. Saw a soldier, and I said, "What happened to you?" And he said, "I was wounded in the back of a truck." That same day, I was called that I had to be in to go represent the Army in a soldier that had died. And he had died 5 days ago. I had talked to a soldier. I'd realized he was next to the guy that died, that was buried in Birmingham, Alabama. And because the medical processing and being able to do engineering and being able to understand how to take care of the human body, we're able to keep this kid alive. And he was able to go attend the funeral of his buddy that was right next to him.
Wow.
Incredible. One more story this is amazing about the medical advances that were made. I was with General Dunwoody, the AMC commander, when we went over there. We visited a hospital in Germany as the halfway point. 2 soldiers in a Humvee, an IED went through, took off one soldier's leg, the other soldier's arm. Okay? It had happened 48 hours before. Because we had the abilities to stop pain in a unique way, these soldiers were able to talk about their experience, what happened, understand and talk to each other about where are you okay? And have a talk about what happened. Both of them were able to call their families and say we're okay. And the process of starting their recovery started immediately. You take 3 years before that, 2 years before that, soldiers get wounded. You put them out. You wake up somewhere in in Washington, D.C., or you wake up at a local hospital around, and you're wondering where your family is. You don't know what happened to everybody else, and you are in this state where it's very hard to recover from. Just the advancement and there's a medical engineer that figured out that electrode and that device and where to put it with a doctor that allowed you to change things. You can talk about the same thing with everything that engineers do today. And there's no better place for engineering to solve problems than right here in Huntsville.
Oh yeah, and your next, am I correct? Your next command was at the Aviation Missile Command at Redstone Arsenal, correct? Yeah. And you really were in it with engineers at that point.
Yes, I was.
And not only that, but we're vitally concerned here at Digital Works with systems engineering, and systems engineers, because you were with helicopters and missiles, and you had to be able to ask somebody, well, if we change that, is that still, the rest of it still going to work? And that's one of the things that happens. Things are changed. Yes. So did you have those kinds of conversations?
We did. We had all kinds of conversations. One of them was in the airworthiness piece that we spent a lot of time on. We had soldiers flying Russian helicopters, U.S. soldiers flying them. We were the airworthiness authority. Well, how do you know that those aircraft work? Well, normally what you do, if it's a Black Hawk, you go to Sikorsky and you talk to them about how it works. Yeah. We had sanctions against this country called Russia, and that's where the prime was, the OEM that manufactured, and you just don't pick up the phone and call and say, tell me how it works. So you have to work your way through that. So we had some great engineers in the Airworthiness Directive Department, now it's called SRD, and you work your way through the process with the engineers. You get them all around and say, okay, this is what's happening with these aircraft. What do we need to look at? How do we associate what the Russian helicopters are based on what we see with Sikorsky and what we see with transmissions? And so we had to get our engineers smart on how that system works. And we had some people that are pretty smart already. And the idea was, how do we mitigate it and make sure that soldiers are safe? In some cases where you don't know, you go back to the engineer and say, okay, if our normal transmission, it goes for 2,000 hours, we'll cut it in half. Every 1,000 hours we'll change it to make sure, if we don't know what we don't know, how do we mitigate the risk? Yeah. And it's one of these things where a guy called me in the middle of the night, because we'd worked together in the past. He said, sir, I'm flying Russian helicopters over the horizon, and I don't have a weapon system to protect myself. I don't have ballistic protection, and I don't know how this aircraft works. So, and he says, can you help? And so now all of a sudden, what you're talking about is lack of decision is a decision. You got to get ahead of it. Engineers need to be smart enough to know how things work. Yeah. Knowing how it works is just as important as knowing the details, if you will, because if you don't have that time to figure it out, and you have to make a decision, it's that experience.
Well, yeah. So being able to look at it as a okay, I've got to ask the question of why were they flying Russian helicopters? Was this so we could learn how the performance characteristics of a possible adversary's aircraft, or were we having to use them for some reason?
Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons for it. One of the main reasons is that we were helping the Iraqis get their flights back, and they had Russian.
That was the equipment they had.
Yeah, and there were a lot of other things we could do with those Russian helicopters as well.
Just out of curiosity, you've been around. You're like 30 years old, so you've done a lot in your brief time on Earth. but,
right.
But did you notice over the years, just over the last few years, how went from having to have big meetings with a bunch of people and looking at a piece of paper to where things were on computer? Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did. And
the move to digital engineering.
Yes, the move to digital engineering. And it was about, and the transition to it was really a lot about making sure that as you go to digital, what am I losing in this transition from doing the systemic stuff that worked for decades? Now we're going digitally fast. And you see that a lot. Heck, we did this. I mean, you do the same thing when you're flying in a helicopter. We used to have maps.
By the way, you are a certified helicopter pilot. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you were.
Yeah, And in the civilian world, I still fly fixed wing, and somehow I got an airline transport pilot license a while back. And
Always got to have something to fall back on you know.
there you go, just in case, just in case. And so you would watch everything goes through this digital transformation. It does, just like we did with paper maps that you used to fly with. You knew exactly where you were. You draw your line, and you know. Now all of a sudden you're trying to rely on digits. And there was this thing when I was in the special ops or aviation unit, the 160th. That was their first R&D officer. Yeah. You try to take away their map, they'll fight you. And my whole life was to try and reduce their workload. Well, we came with this thing digitally that we're able to put into the aircraft to make it digital. What happens is you give them more capability. You give them more capability, their workload just went up.
Yeah.
And I don't care what you do to simplify a soldier's life. He's going to then take that, what the risk that you've reduced or weight you've reduced or the ability to reduce his ability to think, and he's going to take that excess capacity and he's going to move it even more. That's just the nature of him. But from an engineer side, transitioning from the papers to the digital world has actually been a blessing. And this is where model-based system engineering is the next level that we need, because as I talked about, we need speed. We need to understand things quicker, because if you don't have all the money in the world and you have to be able to produce something, the sooner you can produce it, the better off you are. And if you have models-based system engineering, now you can go faster. The frustration I have sometimes with is how much data do you need to validate an engineering process like model-based system engineering?
So you were there even when you were with AMCOM, though, wasn't simulations began to be more of the testing process? Am I correct?
It did. There was a lot of discussion about it, and
whether you can really trust that as opposed to a real time
there was
literal test.
I wanted to do it, and I had a lot of people that were pushing back inside of the test community because, sir, that's not how we do it. That's not the process. Okay, I know, but we have to assume risk. There's never a test you do where you don't assume some sort of risk. If there is a test you do where you don't assume any risk, it is you can't achieve it during the time you need. Now, I'm not talking about nuclear scientist engineering stuff that has significant implications if you get it wrong. But in this case, until you get into the airworthiness piece, there are certain things assumptions you can make. Just for instance, we had a mobile gun system that we were trying to put into the field as part of the Stryker family, and we didn't quite have the number of rounds that we could fire on this gun, the big gun, that it had to fire 6 rounds per minute. We had 5.5 rounds per minute, and it wasn't quite ready. But the unit was getting ready to go to Afghanistan, and they could either go in a Stryker vehicle that only fired 5.5 rounds per minute instead of 6, or they can go in a Humvee. Which one do you want to put them in? And that's when I went back to the chief and said, sir, Chief of Staff of the Army said, sir, it'll only fire 5.5, but the protection they're going to get in a Stryker far exceeds it. And so, but we wouldn't know that if we hadn't been doing our engineering work and know what the standards are and how long it would take to deviate from it. And that's before we had model-based system engineering. MBSE will allow us to go faster, but the bureaucracy inside the Army, we have to recognize the fact we can go faster, and because we'll still be caught up in our own process if we're not careful. So this is about breaking glass all the way.
Yeah. So despite the fact that MBSE, and it's acknowledged by most people, it's where we need to be, and I think that the DoD actually requires the use of MBSE to get a contract or to get work on a project. Yeah. So you have dealt with pushback. Now, though, you're not dealing as a major general. You're dealing as a major general who is retired, but you advise companies. Yeah. When you talk to companies, I feel like that you talk about this speed and trade-off between speed and whether it works is the best it can work. I mean, do you talk about this? Is this a conversation you have in your within the company you have now?
Yeah, it is. It's it's a consulting company, and what I try to first thing I try to align myself with is if it's a company that wants to just make money, no matter what, I'm not a good fit for them.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for are companies that understand that they have a mission, which is to give something to the soldiers that will make a difference in their life, and they're willing to put their money up front to do it in the right way. If in the classic case is CFO, that's a finance officer inside of a company. If that CFO gets 100% of what he wants to get done, the CEO, the executive officer, is not going to be effective because that CFO can't always get it to where he always makes his numbers every single day, no matter what. This is about understanding risk and about where you're going to put your money. And so if I look for companies that are aligned with them, because what I try to do is make sure they understand how the Army thinks, and I want to make sure in some cases the Army knows how these guys think.
Yeah.
And it's important for them to do it because the Army can't do anything without contractors. Contractors can't do anything without the Army. And the idea is let's all understand how we think so that we can actually get ahead of it and do what's right. Because there's so many times when people can't communicate because they don't know what they don't know, how the other's thinking. And you got this deadgum thing called a contract that is really, really nice, but if you can't write in a contract everything that's going to happen, you can't. So what you have to do is
if you could write it down, then you wouldn't need it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's frustrating, but the idea is I try to connect the dots to go faster.
Yeah.
And
so let's get this straight. We're not in an active conflict right now.
Right.
But there's always potential. But the speed thing never goes away, and the doing the engineering to anticipate.
That's correct.
What might be the next thing we have to face? I mean, it's always every time there's a symposium of any sort, I always at some point somebody says now and 25 years from now. So there's but that requires talking to scientists and engineers, and technicians.
Yes, it does. It does, and so you have to engage the Army, the military leadership needs to engage the scientists and engineers. And there's a big restructuring going on in the Army right now, and I am hopeful that the way when they restructure, that engineers will still have a voice in a way that they can be effective, and they don't get buried, if you will, inside of a silo that might be hard for them to break out. It'll get right, but they got to make sure that they don't lose any time in that process because it is important.
Am I correct that from the time you joined the Army in '70 to now, that the use of technology, it probably boggles your mind a little bit to think about how it was when you joined?
Oh, it does.
And how it is now.
It does. Just like flying. When I fly today, I feel like I'm cheating. I don't talk to a weather guy. It's already comes into me. I don't have to go and file a flight plan and call it in. I do it on an app. I have a glass cockpit that's got that shows where I am. 4 different items display that, and when somebody's flying close to me, something pops up and tells me. When I was flying, I went to Jonestown, Guyana. I don't know if you knew that or not. A long time ago. Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm flying out in Guyana by myself with a map that's not a real map. It's a road map, but because
this is sitting on your lap, and you're trying to glance down.
Sitting on my lap over a triple canopy jungle, and it's flat, and you're trying to find it, and you don't know where you're going. And like if I went to do that today, shoot. I'd have digits and coordinates, and I'd have it plugged in with alternates, and you know exactly when you're going to run out of fuel, and it's different.
Okay, so do you ever have to explain its problem, but maybe say, you guys do know that we have to use the most current technology if we want to compete, if you want to compete. Do you ever have to have that conversation that we need to be 21st century? We can't, I know you might have done it this way 20 years ago, but do you ever have to bring somebody forward to now? Do you ever have to have that conversation?
No, I don't. However, in the Army, in the military, because mass is a principle of war, and it exists both in peacetime and during war. And when you're so large, it's hard to stay up with the leading edge of technology on everything across the board. So engineers get frustrated when they see other technology that's out there in the commercial world and they can't get there. And it's true, and it becomes a real challenge when you have computer systems that aren't on the leading edge of technology. It's getting better. But that's why there's why AI is such a big deal, and why we want to make sure we're right on the leading edge. Because, for instance, Golden Dome, classic case. You have to, if you want to put together, stitch together some sort of air defense system that allows you to protect all elements of our country. In some cases, you don't have data that's the data that you need to understand what the enemy is going to do. So you have to have, but you want to be able to have the data and pull it together so you can run your tests. That means you got to come up with synthetic data inside of an AI environment, come up with a data foundry so you can anticipate what the data is going to be at the speed of AI, and somebody's got to validate that data. But this is what we're doing here in this community to figure that out, so that if, and Golden Dome is a big deal, we want to give the engineers everything they have, but we have to create the right environment. We have to have the right tools. So there's a lot of that discussion going on. And the fact that a business management degree guy from Middle Tennessee is involved in this, come on.
Well, systems engineering. I talked to a guy who's with the Army right now, and he said one of the things that excites him was systems engineering, or concepts from systems engineering being used in business practices. And I know you can think of business practices you've used that were exactly that.
It's really important. And so this is where the dialogue of the military telling the business community, what do you want? What is it you're looking for? Not prescriptive, just what's the capability you want? And the Army gets it. The Army came up with something called open system architecture, and they got the industry to change their mind, because and the reason they got them to change their mind about open system architecture, which is being able to plug and play, take somebody's stuff from Sikorsky, plug it into Collins, plug it into Raytheon's, it all works because all the interfaces work. They did it by saying, this is what I'm looking for, and they didn't change their mind. Not once did they change their mind for 3 years. And the military, because things change, sometimes they'll change what they're saying, and the industry will go, okay, we'll wait and see because I'm not sure. They didn't change their mind, and now we're in an environment here where things that will plug and play now where they didn't plug and play before, because the Army communicated effectively. And that's important right now as more technologies out there, and you want to do MBSE and take full advantage of it. The military has to be consistent with, what do you want? Where are you going? And that's where these symposiums you're talking about become really, really important. And not just the 3 and the 4 stars and generals up there talking in a dark room in the big Mark Smith bedroom, but it's about having your conversations separately with some of these other smaller forums there.
And one last point. I already know this, but you are a firm believer in modern engineering, modern digital engineering concepts, and because you really can't compete, especially if you're competing with possible adversaries on the field of battle. You got to be you got to be on the edge, you cutting edge. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And it's believe it or not, I'm looking at it through my infantry eyes of being an infantry platoon leader, trying to cut brush through Panama in a triple canopy jungle. And I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm saying absolutely, because I want to go faster. I don't want to be in the triple canopy jungle. The nature of warfare is changing, and we can reach out longer. We can affect people differently, and we have to change. And the only way we can stay up with that change is model-based system engineering, is our engineering, is our ability to think. The next workforce on the arsenal, to me, is very, very important. I want to, in a perfect world, because I love this community, I love the way people in this community care more about others than themselves, that more than I've seen in anywhere else. I'd love to be able to take someone from this community, a rubber sheet, science, technology, engineering, and math over their head, and give them all the schooling they need, and let them become the next arsenal workforce, because that's what we need. People that know STEM, know how to what goes on in the arsenal, and will do it for others more than themselves. That's the perfect guy.
All right. Major General Jim Myles, retired.
There you go.
Thank you for being with us. And once again, I'm Steve Johnson. Thank you for being with us. And don't forget, it works.